So Frozen Planet is the classic BBC series that came out in 2011 and deals with wildlife at the North and South Poles. So this first episode is basically an intro to the series. It opens up with David Attenborough giving us an intro to what the series is going to be like. We get a lot of great shots of the things we're going to see. It gives us an idea what the narrative structure is going to be like. This series mainly focuses on the seasons. Every episode after this is dealt with a different season, from spring to winter, so it eases you into that. As a general rule of thumb this series, the first half of each episode will deal with the Arctic and the second with the Antarctic. As this episode starts with the Arctic, we feature the Arctic's most iconic animal, and that is the polar bear. You usually see polar bears hunting on the sea ice. Here we get something different, which is polar bears courting each other. It's quite a fun sequence at the start. You see the male and the female meeting up, and they're kind of playing with each other, and they go into the upper slopes to basically mate. However, it turns a bit darker when we see the male fending off other males. It's actually quite brutal. You see the fights he goes through. By the end of that sequence, the male's basically battered, bruised, he's covered in blood. You can tell he just wants to get away from this whole thing. Because it opens up quite fun, you're not prepared for it becoming quite dark later on. And I think that's kind of what this series is like. This series has quite a lot of fun stuff in it, but it also goes to quite dark places. And then we see that when the ice starts melting, we get a lot of migrants, we get shearwaters, we get humpback whales. Then we talk about the glaciers in Greenland. This sequence does a really good job of showing you how impressive glaciers are. You really get a sense of how big they are, and also how much they shape the land. You really do see the land bending to the will of this glacier. And when the glaciers do reach the sea, parts of them just break off. And these are really colossal icebergs. They really are massive. You really get a sense of how big they are because you can see birds flying past, and the birds look microscopic compared to this iceberg. And then as we go further south, we see the tundra, we see the taiga. The main thing we see there is the wolves. The wolves hunting bison is a great sequence. It's kind of iconic. I think people kind of know about it now. It was replicated in Frozen Planet 2, though I don't think it did as good a job there. You get a really good idea how big these wolves and bison are. These really are the biggest versions of these species. The hunt itself is really good. It is expanded on later in the series. It's really good seeing the wolves cornering the bison, and the bison do eventually get away. However, this is one bison that's getting held back by the wolves, and it looks like it might be able to get away, but this one bison just comes along, charges into it, knocks it over, basically just gives it over to the wolves. Again, it is quite bleak. It gets bleaker later in the series, don't get me wrong, but it's a really good sequence as well, and it's one of the standouts from the episode, I think. And again, we get some great shots of the taiga. The trees that are covered in snow is amazing. The snowflakes, that stuff's really good. Seeing the different snowflakes, well, that was probably CGI. It is pretty impressive. And the shots of the great grey owl, while the great grey owl sequence isn't really expansive, you just see it flying around. The shots of that are really impressive, and they're really iconic as well. And then we move to the Antarctic. And of course, like we had the polar bears in the Arctic, the most iconic animals in the Antarctic are the penguins. We see gentoo penguins just on the beach. It's really nice. However, we then see them getting chased by sea lions. So this one bull sea lion's just chasing all the penguins. It catches a couple. We get this really good sequence of the sea lion chasing the penguins on land, and it is just so funny. It's really funny because they're both pathetic on land. The penguin's pretty crap on land. The sea lion's just as bad. The sea lion does catch the penguin a couple times, but every time it gets it, the penguin just gets up and runs away. It's really funny, and it keeps on going. Like, I wasn't sure if I'd still find it as funny as I did years ago, but it is still pretty good. And when the penguin does get away at the end, it's really nice. I think if the penguin hadn't got away at the end, that sequence would have fell a bit flat. But because it does, it adds to the humour of the sequence, and it is pretty funny. It is a really good sequence. Then we go further south, we see the migrants there. Again, humpback whales, minke whales, stuff like that. The main thing there, though, is the orcas. So the orca sequence is amazing. We see orcas, wave-washing seals. This is something that I think was pretty well known at the time. At least I'd heard about it at the time. But it had never really been filmed before. We saw in life them try to take crab-eater seals and that not really working out for them. So this time we see them going for Weddell seals. And the Weddell seal, to be fair, just looks kind of gormless. Like, it's just having a nice day, chilling out on the ice. And these orcas come along and just ruin its day. This really is an impressive hunting strategy. I know we've seen a lot of orca hunts before, but I think this might be the most strategic they've ever been. And we see them washing the seal off, and the seal's just fighting for its life. And they do these little things to try and get the seal, because while the orcas are clearly superior to the seal can still bite them, so they're trying to distract it. They create turbulence in the water, they blow bubbles while they try and grab it. That's really cool. And the seal does manage to get onto some ice, but the orcas can easily grab it. We even see the orca pop its head out the water and go, nah, it's too easy. And we see them just playing with the seal, just pushing the ice around. Orcas are often portrayed as the baddies in these kind of sequences, but I think this is possibly the most villainous they've ever been. They really do come across as very sadistic in this sequence, and eventually the seal does manage to get away. It gets into the ice, but it's absolutely knackered, and the orcas just poke their heads out, grab it by its flipper, and just pull into the water. The last shot of the seal just looking absolutely helpless as it's pulled back into the water is really harrowing. It's really good. It's very effective. This is probably one of the highlights of the series, to be honest with you. It's one of the things I always think about when I think of this series. It may be the highlight. We'll find out at the end of the series if it still is, but it is very, very good. It's a really, really good sequence, and really impressive as well. It is really good. And then as we go further south, we see less animals. We see more of the interior of the Antarctica. We see the ice caves, the life underneath the ice, all the starfish and the jellyfish and everything. That's all cool. We talk about the Antarctic expeditions and how daunting it would be, because it really is an inhospitable landscape. The massive mountains, the glaciers, the dried valleys, all of that is pretty just horrific to cross, especially the glacier. Like the shots of that, I'm looking at it and thinking, how the hell did anyone cross that? And we end at the South Pole where we see David Attenborough talking about how impressive the poles were, but now we know these habitats are extremely vulnerable, and what happens there will impact us. That's a really good way to end the episode. And then we get the diaries, and that's all about the people filming the Antarctic volcanoes. That's all cool, to be fair, that's fine. The best part of that is the people filming the orcas, though. Just seeing the orcas rise at the water right next to them, you really felt like that was a really good encounter for these guys. Like, I feel really jealous of them. I'd love that. And the shots as well, them coming at the water, are iconic. That's probably the most iconic shot from the series. So yeah, this episode is pretty good. It's a pretty good intro to the series. You really get a good sense of what you're in for. It gives you the main cast of characters. Because there aren't that many different animals at the poles, the same kind of animals pop up in each episode. It kind of creates a sense of familiarity for you, which is kind of why I like these polar episodes. The highlight is the orcas, but also the polar bears are really good at the start. The penguin and the sea lion's hilarious. And it's just a really good episode. I really like it. So yeah, what did you think of this episode? What were your highlights? Let me know in the comments below. As ever, feel free to like, comment and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. Yeah, I'll see you next week, and goodbye.